Damn. Oh well. Well, I wanted to do that reaction. Now I want to start up this game real quick. Damn. That's unfortunate for Canadians, but also at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, same thing is happening here too. Like, I don't know what else you can do about it other than, uh, I don't want to. It's like I don't want to say an overthrow of the government, but at the same time, I don't know. Also, I need to figure out what like Parliament or how long you can be a prime minister for, because I could have sworn Justin was put in like 2015 or some shit, or 2014 or whatever. Like I've been hearing about that dude's name for a while, so I was kind of like, why is he still here? Or did he like how many times did he get reelected? Oh, this is gonna take forever. Nah, we're not doing that. No, dog, we're not doing that. I got another video. Fuck all that. Where'd it go? No shit. Feels bad. Actually, you know what? You can do that. He had another one we wanted to look at too. Where'd it go? Oh, that's an hour long. No. I'm not gonna do an hour long one. That's insane. I will give that one a look though. Maybe later. Oh. Shit, okay.
The American
Yeah, it's like we'll do that. It's like we'll do that while that's doing that thing. We'll just wait, where is it? Boop. So we'll just do that. Is a joke.
president is often viewed as the most powerful person in the world.
Yep.
Whoever wins the presidential election carries an enormous amount of strength as the president. But in reality, what real power do they actually have? It seems like more and more today, the US president doesn't have as much power as you may think. Maybe they did 100 years ago, but the world has shifted, and so has the American system. And as many of you will be aware, there are much darker forces in power. People who remain in power for decades, people you've never heard of. A handful of people making decisions that are out of President Trump's or Kamala's hands, and the public will never know who they really are.
I wonder if he's talking about BlackRock at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
So then who really has the power in America? And does the election even matter if the president doesn't have the power to stop these people? And if
Hot topic, I feel like voting, putting whatever party you want in there, whatever party gets in, I feel like they don't have the ability to do anything. So I don't think it matters at all anyway. As much as that sucks. But I mean, it seems like whoever's in office, at least in America, whoever's in office, they have all these promises, and let's just say they make 10 massive promises that they run on. Maybe one of them gets addressed during the actual time as president, and all the other things that we hear about are other people in his cabinet that are doing things while that nigga just fucks off and plays golf. That's just usually what it is. So
how did it ever get like this? But what happens if we land in a future war? We'll find out with today's sponsor, Conflict of Nations, a real-time grand strategy game where you take command of a modern-day nation in a World War III scenario. This isn't your typical strategy game. Here you're managing everything from troop movements to infrastructure development, deploying a war with the same account. Since today, power. But he warned of the disastrous rise of misplaced power that could come out of what he described as the military-industrial complex.
We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society.
He was referring to a well-oiled machine of military men in the defense industry where weapon manufacturers and equipment for the military directly influence foreign policies, as well as national defense policy. And unfortunately, later generations didn't heed his warning at all. And today, the military-industrial complex consumes more than half the federal discretionary budget every year.
They do that, and also apparently at this time they're getting audited, and there's like billions and billions of dollars that they cannot account for at all. That's just gone. Surprise, surprise.
2023, the proposed budget for the Pentagon and nuclear weapons work at the Department of Energy alone was $886 billion. A report in April of the same year estimated that taxpayers spend an average of $1,087 on weapons contractors annually. So why is so much money spent going to weapons, and how are they even more powerful than the president in dictating war? Well, war is very lucrative. It's one of the best ways to make money. It creates jobs and keeps factories open. So it's easy to see why weapons manufacturers get behind a policy to ensure that war continues every year.
3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations.
Through lobbying and the revolving door phenomenon, the military officially often takes up positions in the defense industry, and then justifies perceived threats whether they carry weight or not. It makes sense for America to build up its military during a time like the Cold War, when tensions between it and the Soviet Union were running high. There were dozens of weapons contractors to go to, meaning competition was fierce and prices were fair. However, today, even though America isn't actively at war with another country, the government seems dead set on finding a reason to continue weapons production at an exponential rate. The whole situation is just made worse because the number of companies the government contracts to produce weapons has shrunk to just 5. Sure, there is still competition between the companies, and there were issues like we see in the War Dogs movie, where dodgy companies would start supplying the military. Obviously this had to stop, but this means that the Pentagon can only do so much against being overcharged for weapons of war. America isn't building weapons because it needs to, it's building weapons because 5 companies that make massive financial contributions.
I forgot about them. These I've heard of. I've never heard of RTX.
To their preferred candidates campaign profit from building unpredictably dangerous products, and as long as the government continues to lean on these companies for financial support, they will always maintain their power and push for more war across the world to ensure more profits and more power in and of itself, further pushing this never-ending cycle of war. But this power has also been further assisted by intelligence agencies, who keep important information out of political conversations. We all know that intelligence agencies like the CIA and many others gather information so that the government can stay ahead of the game. This information is meant to assist in making informed decisions. The president gets a detailed report daily from the CIA.
Which is crazy, because it's supposed to be for that, and yet they also use it to spy on average people for some reason.
So different intelligence organizations are prioritized to collect certain types of intelligence. And then within the confines of how they collect, they're also given unique authorities. Authorities are a term that's directed by the executive branch. Different agencies have different authorities to execute missions in different ways. FBI can't execute the same way CIA executes, and CIA can't execute the same way NGA executes. But then at the end, excuse me, when it's all collected, then yes, CIA still acts as a final synthesizing repository to create what's known as the President's Daily Brief.
While this report is sometimes over 100 pages long, an assistant will always brief the president. The CIA also gets its information from the FBI and other agencies. Often, as we've seen recently, many intelligence agencies come together and share all of their information together, whilst also controlling who receives relevant information and, as a result, how important policy decisions are made. There are also concerns about surveillance overreach and its potential to be used for political purposes and influence political outcomes, as we've seen with people like Edward Snowden. Those concerns have gained much validity. After so many instances have happened where the CIA kept things hidden from Congress and sometimes even the president to make,
which is insane. Just to hear that, like, yeah, you know, we are given what seems like, at least to the average American, we are given essentially unlimited power, and we can find what we need whenever we need it, whenever we want it, for whatever reason. And then the person that is supposed to be keeping you in check, you're just like, yeah, nah, we're just not going to tell him it's actually not that important. That's kind of insane. I mean, no one really likes the 3-letter forms of government, or, you know, places like that, like the ATF, fuck them. You know what I'm saying? But, like, also at the same time, that's also insane how they're just allowed to do this. And also, again, we all know it. It's just nothing. There's nothing we can do about it. That's crazy. How do we
make sure certain outcomes happened. Now, the CIA's got an awful history, and we've actually spoken about it before in this video here.
Yeah, it's very
But in
bad.
2009, it actually came out that several directors of the CIA had withheld information from Congress about an unnamed covert program for 8 years. It was rumored to have been an assassination program, and according to a report from the Wall Street Journal, based on what they were told by former intelligence officials, the program had been an attempt to capture or kill Al-Qaeda operatives. And whilst this might sound good on the surface, it does raise some questions about the power they have in influencing political decisions and even
See, that's what I was thinking, but also, if you thought for a single second that they were going to use that only to kill someone from Al-Qaeda, you're insane. There's no shot they were only going to use it for that. Absolute power
for
corrupts,
itself,
absolutely.
far overcoming the power of just the president alone. However, this was nothing compared to what happened in 2017, when the CIA revealed just how much influence they could potentially have over the government. In February of that year, it came out that the organization had refused to share intelligence with the then President Donald Trump, for fear this might get leaked after his team made contact with the Russian government. Tensions were already running a little high between the agency and the former president, after several officials left because they refused to work under him, so this new revelation was just adding fuel to the fire. While the information kept from him might not have been particularly important or something necessary for him to know, it definitely opened people's eyes to the idea that the president might not have known everything going on behind the scenes, and the very real possibility that vital information could be kept from the president if agencies like the CIA decide to keep it under wraps, all because they just don't trust the president, meaning they overall have
I
far
was about to say, so you mean to tell me that just because you don't like this dude, you're just going to keep a lot of shit from him? Oh my god, dude.
more power. And that begs the question, who even runs these intelligence agencies? Almost nobody knows their names. And yet these people may have actually more power than the president. And yes, no single man should be left with the responsibility of a massive amount of power, but a government secret agency also shouldn't be able to withhold information that could change the political landscape, and even the entire geopolitical landscape and future wars to come. But unfortunately, this is one way that the government, and particularly the president, really doesn't have any power, as there are just so many examples of private companies taking advantage of the vulnerable to maintain their high profit margins. Take Monsanto for example. Any presidential efforts made to change food production and safety in America have been hindered by Monsanto's dominance in the industry. It's the reason why America's food is so bad compared to European standards and many other countries across the world, as Monsanto's control extends to patented genetically modified seeds, which makes it almost impossible to ever act against them, as they own almost all of the seeds. This influence stems from Monsanto's lobbying activities that sway Congress and regulatory agencies such as the FDA and USDA, and accordingly any
About to say lobbying is essentially, if you didn't know, lobbying is bribery, which is illegal. But if they change the name and make it look different, it is now all of a sudden no longer illegal.
efforts by the president to alter farming methods to elevate food safety or decrease corporate dominance encounter opposition from this established corporate power, making it almost impossible to ever enact meaningful changes without backing from lawmakers. And the pharmaceutical industry is yet just another example of this. Big Pharma has a massive effect on so many people's lives, and some people don't even realize this until they need to get medication or a hospital bill. Unlike other countries, America's federal government doesn't regulate drug prices, allowing manufacturers to price life-saving medication as high as they want without any consequence to themselves. This level of freedom infamously led to Martin Shkreli buying the rights to a drug like Daraprim, which is used to treat malaria and severe infections caused by HIV, and he infamously raised the price for this from $13.50 to $750. Everyone memed this, he became famous for it and showed no remorse for doing so, even commenting that if he could go back, he would have increased the price and that his utmost concern was creating a profit for his shareholders. But whilst this might just be one strange example, this is actually a widespread phenomenon across America, and all of us saw how much power companies like Pfizer truly have over America during the pandemic. It's clear that disease and suffering is immensely profitable for these companies. They want more and more vulnerable people. They profit from a country that's sick from poisoned food, a stressful work environment, and legal drug addictions, as they would rather profit off of vulnerable people through absurd prices than assist the vulnerable. And this is proved time and time again by the fact—
I was about to say, of course they want to do that. Of course they don't want to help the poverty-stricken, because there's no money in it. That's why I feel like a lot of shit just isn't going to change regardless of who's in office. And also, this is just fucking, it's ridiculous. There's nothing you can do.
That while many pharmaceutical companies use their profits to fund research into new ways to treat deadly diseases, most of the time these profits are just going back into purchasing stocks. This combination of negotiations with insurance companies over rebates, patents that prevent other drug companies from selling the same drugs at lower prices, and the lack of inclusion of the government leads to insane prices compared to other countries, especially if you don't have any insurance. In more recent years, things have gotten even worse because agencies like the FDA are now on pharmaceutical companies' payroll, meaning they are making a profit and might be more lenient with the drugs that come through from these companies, showing that inadvertently, Big Pharma almost just controls the government completely. They have almost all the power, and they can advertise themselves everywhere.
America is brought to you by Pfizer.
CBS Health Watch, sponsored by Pfizer.
I feel like something else that happened, just because of, the disease that happened a couple of years ago. Since this thing was named everywhere, a lot of people are going to be a lot more wary. At least I would hope a lot of people are going to be a lot more wary about anything that comes from them. I mean, I doubt it, but it's something that should happen.
Anderson Cooper 360. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Where Big Pharma is allowed to advertise drugs like antidepressants on the screen. But how are they allowed to promote drugs so openly and market them, all whilst controlling the FDA themselves? Well, it's just because of how powerful their lobbying efforts really are, often trying to convince the government that them charging ridiculously high prices for drugs that treat life-threatening diseases is fair because those that need it are paying for life, never mind the fact that many go into crippling debt to pay the exorbitant prices. While pharmaceutical companies in America don't have a direct say in how the country is governed, they do affect a major aspect of it. However, some companies like BlackRock and other Wall Street funds are completely working themselves into governments and making the governments reliant on them, where people have no idea what's really happening with this company or the leadership, and yet they're controlling major decisions in the country. BlackRock also participates in lobbying and donations, of course, but while they don't directly contribute, as this could cause some issues, its staff and executives do the work behind the scenes. Now, BlackRock tries to keep silent in the shadows instead of bringing any attention to their power. It's why almost nobody hears of it, and this is to their advantage to keep their dealings quiet. Yet BlackRock is just one company. Whilst being one of the most infamous, there are a ton of other companies just like BlackRock that are influencing politicians through lobbying and donations. When their interest in one policy might change to the company's detriment, it's easy to imply they will pull their support, and this can and will quickly change the politicians' minds. And since BlackRock is essential for other companies, it can wheel and deal with the government and companies to get favorable outcomes, all with almost no risk factor for BlackRock. If a company backs out, there are many other companies to replace their influence, and the government will play ball with them to keep whatever control they think they have, and keep the security of BlackRock's support, making sure BlackRock can always bail them out in an economic crisis. Nobody wants to get on the wrong side of these sorts of companies. This is probably why President Obama's former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Jason Furman, claimed that the president's power over the economy was limited because most of the factors influencing the economy were from outside sources. That is some pretty powerful insight there. This is one of the most accurate things said in government. Most Americans presume the president has a greater impact, and they tend to blame the president for bad economic issues.
See, I was one of those people. I was always thinking that myself, but then as I got older and older and started looking into stuff myself, it just started to not make sense. So I kind of like how everyone, well, again, not everyone, but more and more people are starting to see that maybe this is bullshit.
It seems almost obvious that the president can change the economy, but it's really not that true. The real factors influencing the economy are the Federal Reserve, global markets, private sector, and legislative constraints. The Federal Reserve affects policies on interest rates and inflation control. Global markets affect energy prices and foreign exchange rates, and this impact reflects international levels which are already clearly out of US control. The private sector consists of companies just like BlackRock, who for the most part are never influenced by policies, which is leading to a clear picture of the deep state. The deep state seems to be the people with the real power in America, a collection of unelected bureaucrats, intelligence agencies, military personnel, high-up investment funds, and other government entities that are referred to as the deep state. These influences all work within the government and often impact a more targeted agenda like national security. They will delay, obstruct, and alter decisions made by the president if they believe that it will jeopardize national security. But of course, they have their own agendas apart from this. They control mass surveillance, drone warfare, military intervention, regardless of who the president is. The CIA, FBI, and other internal organizations all act in their best interests outside of public accountability. A great example of this is when President Jimmy Carter wanted to withdraw US troops from Korea in 1978. He intended to save billions of dollars, and he referred to it as trimming the fat. His position faced immense resistance. The CIA report contradicted his theory, and many military officials even suggested that if he did withdraw the US troops, it could potentially cause more war. In the end, President Jimmy Carter was overruled, and this happens time and time again. The deep state will influence US foreign policy, sometimes independent or contrary to the elected government's agenda. Even President JF Kennedy indirectly warned about the deep state in his speech about transparency.
There is little
And we
value
all know what happened to him.
in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
The US government's revolving door is the movement of personnel between roles as legislators and regulators, as well as members of the industries affected by the legislation or regulation. This revolving door is very often how policy and regulation get captured as insiders use their knowledge, experience, and contacts in government to advance private interests. Thousands of former officials resign to enter private companies, often in the same field they once supervised and licensed. On the flip side, a company executive may become an official in the government. This can help to get industry insights into government by appointing private individuals. Today we see this all the time where business executives and lobbyists end up taking positions in federal agencies or state bodies. And one of the most observed repercussions of this is that many who spin through these continuously revolving doors end up as lobbyists, and they stay in the government for far too long, lobbying for policies that help their new employers whilst using their past front as government officials. And because of this, they have significant leverage in getting bills passed. This leads to a bunch of conflict of interest situations, where these officials are prioritizing corporate interests
Large Black Bear, thanks for the sub. Thanks for the sub.
over what is best for the public. And with these giant companies and private interests, and their ability to hire former officials, means they then gain favor with favorable access to policymakers, sidelining smaller businesses and the general public as a whole. It's basically just corruption with extra steps, as this creates a lack of accountability which is needed to create a stable, effective organization acting in the public's best interest.
Also, interestingly enough, stuff like this and learning about stuff like this is what also is leading to communism. I'm not saying it'll work, but I mean, when the average person hears this, I have a hard time believing that it would be surprising that they would just want to go into a room like this and send them to Jesus.
Now recently some states and the federal government have implemented calling off periods during which former officials are restricted from lobbying their former agencies. These are measures to reduce immediate conflicts of interest, but they often face challenges related to enforcement and compliance. It's just as easy to tell another employer exactly what to do and say in their absence, so you can see why these restrictions are ineffective. The way the system is set in America makes sure that even the president is definitely not in the most powerful position, and rightfully so. The founding fathers foresaw this, and they could see that if the wrong person gained this position of power and was allowed to do what he wanted, they would inevitably become a tyrant, or just the position itself would attract tyrants. And of course, this would completely ruin the Constitution and all the ideals of the American spirit. The government allows the president to be a key player in foreign policy as well as a commander-in-chief, with executive orders and appointment powers, but even these decisions aren't really his own, as it must usually be signed off by the Senate or Congress depending on the area of interest. Some of these decisions need fast action, like responding to threats, and as Commander-in-Chief, the President has significant authority over military operations. The President's power to appoint federal judges, ambassadors, and key cabinet officials will also have long-term impacts on his administration. These are some of the people who will either oppose or offer full backing to some of the most important decisions.
Honestly, that's not surprising. It is very annoying.
But when you stand back and look at the much bigger picture, it can easily be seen how those in the background have more of an impact than the public ever knows.
Hold on. What's that?
For example, if some giant Wall Street investment fund now has the ability to have a seat at the table where the president's decisions are being made, it shows a shaky foundation of what the original constitution intended. This is a breakdown in the system created by modern times that certainly favors towards corporations and their agendas and not the public's best interests. In each decade, many presidents have warned about certain things encroaching on the power of the president. Eisenhower warned against the growing power of the military-industrial complex.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
John F. Kennedy pushed back against intelligence agencies and their complete power over America. And now if you look at the last two presidents, you will really see no change in focus. Donald Trump invoked Drain the Swamp, which was intended to eliminate corruption within the government. However, while in power, his administration saw more influence from corporate America and extreme defense spending. And it's been no better with Biden.
Hold on. God damn it. This is what we're doing, but not yet. Just a second.
and probably won't get better for a very long time. That's not to say that you shouldn't vote. Voting is incredibly important. It's the foundation of democracy and your God-given.
It's like, I mean, yeah, I see that, and everyone says that, but also at the same time, like, that nothing about what we went over in this video or in the last video makes it seem like voting does anything.
Right, but it's clear that no real change will happen overnight, and the web of power controlling the United States is becoming more vast and serious than has ever been before. Once we all realize this and highlight the truth, can real change begin? And remember, Conflict of Nations is a free online PvP strategy game happening in modern global warfare, where you can choose your own strategy, engage in epic battles, and take over the world. And if you use my link in the description below...
Right. Well, like, what are you supposed to do? You know what I'm saying? Because, like, if the people you're voting for can't do anything, and there's nothing that you could do on an individual level, I don't understand what... God, it's so ridiculous. You want to vote because you think it'll change, nothing changes, and then you go back to vote the next 4 years, and then it turns out it's all the reports are like, oh yeah, it got worse. It actually got worse this time. It seems like that for every time you vote. So it's like, what the fuck, dude?